So now I'll introduce our speaker, Donald Kirkpatrick. He received his Bachelor of Science in Geology with honors and distinction from James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia in 1979. Don spent his entire James Madison University senior year on a museum study appointment to the U.S. National Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. And then from 1979 until 1981, he completed graduate studies in the Department of Systematics and Ecology at the University of Kansas. From 1981 until 1989, he was a surface warfare officer in the U.S. Navy. He served on 2 cruisers and at 2 Naval Special Warfare commands and received an honorable discharge. For the next 29 years, Don was a middle school and high school science teacher in the Marion County School District until he retired in 2018. He is one of the College Board's South Carolina Advanced Placement Advocates. He is a member of the Geological Society of America, the National Center for Science Education, the Paleontological Research Institution, and the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, where he serves as a member of their Diversity Committee. Let's give a warm welcome to our speaker, Donald Kirkpatrick. Thank you.
A founding, that's not the right word, but a basic principle I always used as a teacher is that one. Make things simple, but not too simple. If it's too simple, you introduce all kinds of misconceptions. And I could go through example after example of what I mean by that, but that's not what you're here for, so that's not what I'm going to do. But if you're wondering why so much of this is so technical, that's part of why. I try to make it general, but at the same time, I stay technical. Some of the things I'm going to try to do today: basic introduction to Earth history, very basic, and time periods. Demonstrate how to figure out what river levels are doing, except for the Waccamaw. The Pee Dee right now is heading to flood stage. Not a good time to go collect fossils there. Overview of South Carolina geography and the things that lived here 66 plus million years ago. Some of the vertebrate fossils I've recovered and other people have recovered from their research projects that are that age. I had a poster laying out there. I've gotten involved in a couple of rabbit holes that aren't vertebrate related. That's invertebrate stuff, but if you do research, you find little rabbit holes that you end up going down, and that's one of them, and it's going to lead to a publication, so I thought I'd put it out here. And it only exists because of people like you that go and collect things on the beach and then bring it to me and go, what is it? And then I go, oh, nobody's published that before. So, okay, time to get information on it. Basic thing about introduction to ethics and laws of fossil collecting. I may end there. I'm going to watch the time. I planned this presentation to take about an hour. If I'm in an hour and I haven't gotten to those last 2, I'm not going to worry about it. I was asked to talk about those 2 things at the last presentation I did. So if I have time, I'll throw it in there. If I don't, I'll wrap it up at about an hour. And I will finish with dealing with laws of collecting, because that, in my opinion, is part of my job. This research isn't being done just by me. I have teamed with Dave Chichimuri at the State Museum in Columbia. He is a fossil shark expert. I am not a fossil shark expert. I'm becoming one, okay? I have basically been assigned the job of trying to figure out the fish. And by fish, I mean bony fish, not the sharks in the stuff that we're researching. But I'm learning, and there's things that he said that I've later gone back and said, I don't think so, and he's come to my position on it. So it's back and forth. I'm also working with Jim Knight, who used to be the curator at the Natural History Museum in Columbia before Dave. Jim is a snake expert, fossil, recent. So he gets involved with reptiles. He also gets involved with the mammals that we find. I worked at the National Museum many years ago, and I'm sure that's part of why I still get access to the National Museum. I'm not a PhD, I don't have my master's, I'm not a graduate student, I'm not an official academic, but if I ask to go up and look at collection material they've got that's related to what I'm doing here, I get access. I know of plenty of other people that have asked to do the same thing and they don't get access, and I'll just leave it at that. Rules there have changed a lot since 9/11. When I was there as a student, I could walk in the Constitution Avenue entrance, wave at the security guard, head down the main library, go right up to the first floor where my office was. I didn't wear an ID tag. I didn't need anybody's permission. I didn't need an escort. Now, not only do you need an escort, but they put you in a room that's locked, which I'll show you a little bit of. And escort required. So, lots of reasons that's happened besides 9/11. Won't get into all that. I plan to go back up there in March coming up. That's the desk and microscope and place where I was working. That entire cabinet there on wheels is where I had told them what specimens I wanted to look at while I was there, so they got them together and wheeled them into me. The good old days of walking down the halls and going through the drawers and looking at what they got is mostly gone. This little room that I'm in here is behind a locked door, so you would need a keypad to be able to even get in there. If I wanted to go to the bathroom, I had to let somebody know I was going to the bathroom. That's just one of the drawers. This is all Encodus, one of the species I'm going to mention. More Encodus. More of the room that I was in. But notice even in the room I was in, they've got steel bars with locks on all the drawers. Not that they don't trust me. This is an area where I could walk down and they didn't have steel bars, and I just show you this. If you've never been to the National Museum, you won't see this. This is not open to the public, and it is floor after floor after floor, hallway after hallway after hallway that looks like this. And this is just the main museum. They have off-site centers of storage that are bigger than the main museum. This is an area where if I wanted to go look through the cabinets, I still could. That's Mark Florence, the guy in charge of invertebrates, down at the end. A big part of paleontology is patience and determination. And I'm not going to go through the whole story of this. Basically, it's the flat part, the plastron of a sea turtle, that Dave Chichamuri has been working on for about the last 8 years, reassembling the pieces one by one. It's just one of probably 20 projects he's got going on. When he gets tired of working on one or doesn't have any success for a while, he goes over and messes with this. Eventually, he will have most of an entire fossil sea turtle. And working on something for 5 or 6 years at a time in paleontology is par for the course. Earth history. One way to think about Earth history is to think of it in terms of a clock. And if we start up here at roughly 4.5 billion years ago, we have the start of Earth history. I'm not going to argue about the specifics. We don't need to go there. Just the point is roughly 4.5 billion years ago. And then Earth history keeps on going. Some of the earliest evidence of photosynthesis of prokaryotes, simplest form of life, roughly 3.2 billion years ago. Coming around to roughly 2.3 billion years ago, when there's evidence that the Earth actually started having oxygen in the atmosphere. From here to there, no oxygen in the atmosphere. Then we come around to here and we start picking up some of the earliest evidence of slightly larger life than just prokaryotes. And then we come around to the Cambrian explosion. So we've gone all the way to here before fossils of living things start becoming abundant and obvious. And the period of time I'm going to talk about is right about there, the Late Cretaceous. So people think when I say 66 million years ago, people say, oh, that's a long time ago. Not in terms of Earth history. Not in terms of the evolution of life. Here's another image that is better in some ways. It shows that same circular timeline as a clock, but here it shows it as a column. Living things, I don't want to say, fossils that are obviously living things, multicellular living things become common in the fossil record right there. And what I'm going to be talking about is right up here. Not the Cenozoic, but right underneath it in the Mesozoic. Most of Earth history is down here. But a lot of people don't care about it because it doesn't have fossils in it. It doesn't, I shouldn't say it doesn't have fossils, it doesn't have really nice fossils. Let's put it that way. Things that are obvious. Most people are interested in little cells. And if you want to go look at life before this, you're looking at little cells. So, the fossil world, and people that are interested in it tends to start with the Cambrian. But again, I'm talking about the Late Cretaceous, and around here and in South Carolina in general, the fossils we find are Late Cretaceous up to recent. All of the rest of this, except for one site in Columbia where there's Cambrian material, does not exist in South Carolina. I'm going to skip all that. This is a diagram I've used in my presentations for decades, literally. But I decided to go and show the other two because I feel this kind of leaves you with the impression that everything happens starting here and up to there, but the reality is most of the evolution of Earth is way down, long before this ever happened. All right. As it says, get out your cell phone if you're interested in trying to figure out river levels. I spend most of my time on the Great Pee Dee when it is low. If you want to look at Cretaceous sites around here, that's where you go. And the point of this diagram is that the Pee Dee River starts all the way up in what's called the Yadkin River. What's happening on the Yadkin River right now? Flooding, big time. Where's all that water going to end up coming? Down here. Some people are concerned about, oh, what about the Waccamaw? The Waccamaw is not going to be a problem. Probably. I say probably because if the Pee Dee gets high enough, it will start backing up into the Waccamaw. So, if you're interested and you have your cell phone out, go to the National Weather Service main page. When you get there, take your finger or however you point or click right in this area. And you should get an image that looks something like that. It'll have different colors on it now because, well, this showed a time when the Waccamaw was starting to come up to flood. Take your finger or however you click and click basically on Conway. And you should get something that looks like that. The weather forecast for Conway today and the next few weekdays, I don't remember when I did this, so the days may not match. And what you're going to do now is scroll to the bottom of the page. And you're going to get something that looks like that. A bunch of little blue things. And what you're going to do is click on where it says river water levels. Right there. Click on that. And you're going to get something that looks like that. It's going to look really different depending on how you orient your phone and a whole bunch of stuff. But you're going to get something that looks like that, except that today, up in here is all going to be red and purple and all kinds of weird colors because of all the flooding in the western parts of North Carolina and South Carolina. And now, you either use your fingers, or if you've got a plus minus sign somewhere, you're going to zoom into, this is where you have to know some geography, you're going to zoom into basically Florence. And you're going to get something that looks like that. Again, the colors are going to be different. Now, where's the Pee Dee River in all of this? It doesn't show you really nicely. I don't like this update because it doesn't make the rivers really obvious. But they're there. And you have to look carefully. Here's Conway. That's Marion. That's Florence. That's what I want if I'm interested in the Pee Dee River level, right there. So I push on that little green box. Today it's not green, it's yellow or orange or whatever color because it's going to flood. And what you'll get off to the side is what the river level is. I don't go out and collect unless it is 5 feet or lower at that point. There's no point in going at any other time, at any of the sites I'm going to show you, unless you want to swim. Questions about this before I move on? You can use these basic instructions to find river levels anywhere in the country. You just go where you're interested, find the local web page for the weather, scroll to the bottom, same thing all over again. Moving on. River level can change rapidly. This was not even a hurricane or a flood. 7 feet becomes 43 in less than 24 hours. The good news is it also goes down rapidly. All right, Cretaceous reptiles. And specifically, I'm drawing your attention up to here where it says Cretaceous. And ceratopsians existed up until the end of the Cretaceous, or nithopods ended. Now, some of these are dinosaurs and some of them are not. If you see this, a lot of people like to say, oh, these are all dinosaurs. No, they're not. A few of them are. Ornithopods are dinosaurs. Ankylosaurs are dinosaurs. Ceratopsians are dinosaurs. Mosasaurs are lizards. Pterodactyls are flying reptiles, but they're not dinosaurs. Carnosaurs, which this diagram did not show, which tells you how old it is. This is the line that eventually led to birds. Theropods. Late Cretaceous North America. If you go to museums, generally, like the National Museum in Washington, and you go see their exhibits of dinosaurs, where did most of them come from? Do they come from South Carolina? No. Do they come from North Carolina? No. Do they come from anywhere on the East Coast? No. Okay. They come from out here, where there used to be an interior seaway. shallow interior seaway. If you drive across the country, drive that way or this way, you'll notice it gets pretty flat out there. And it's pretty flat all the way across. And the seaway was flat all the way across pretty much, and shallow. And that allowed things that died there, it's part of the explanation, that things that died out there get preserved. Whole animals get preserved, by and large. The one problem with most of those specimens is they are squashed flat. You don't see them like that in a museum. They've been reconstructed and modeled and all that, so they're three-dimensional, but they were squashed flat. Here in South Carolina, we get lots of scraps, but the good news is we get three-dimensional stuff. It hasn't been squashed flat. What was South Carolina like at the same time? Underwater. And the difference, by and large, is that it wasn't shallow. It went deep fairly quickly. Whereas this was shallow all the way across. And you can look at a physiographic map of South Carolina and basically see where the water came up to most of the time. Came up into about here. The area better known as the Sand Hills. Beach sand hills. Late Cretaceous beach sand hills. So if we want to go find dinosaurs in South Carolina, you aren't looking down here. You're going to go look up there. But where are those late Cretaceous rocks and sediments? Deep underground. Good luck, okay? Haven't been found yet. And the ones that are on the surface are so deeply weathered, they're useless for collecting anything from. Here's another way of looking at it. This area right here is good for finding late Cretaceous material. South Carolina's right here. I'm not going to get into great detail about it right now, but if you notice it says Cape Fear Arch. There is an arch underneath all the rocks here that have pushed the late Cretaceous up to near the top. So that the late Cretaceous is just underneath Miocene, Oligocene, Pliocene material around here. And it sometimes shows up on the beach, and when people dig things in their yard, they sometimes hit it. On the other hand, if you come down here to Charleston, they have lots of fossils down there, but you're not going to find anything late Cretaceous down there because the late Cretaceous is 900 feet underground. All right. Some of the more better known spots that I've collected at, and I'm going to focus on a couple of them today. Quinby, Birch's Ferry, which is well known, Allison's Ferry. If you check the literature, you're going to find out about King Street, Intracoastal Waterway. Lynchburg doesn't exist anymore. Kane's Landing is now private property, and the owner doesn't want people on it, so I'm going to respect that. He lets me on, but he's asked me not to advertise or anything, so fine, okay, that's what I'll do. Allison's Ferry on a good day, 5 feet or lower. The Great Pee Dee, 5 feet or lower. And we're going to walk down the boat ramp. And you get down there, and now you find late Cretaceous limestone, Pee Dee Formation. And you bring those chunks of limestone back. But you might find stuff just lying on the ground there. It happens. And you see all that little black thing sticking out of it. Shark's teeth, bones, fish teeth, of other than sharks. That one's kind of obvious. This is the setup I have here at the museum for acetic acid. The 2 bins. Specimens being eaten by acetic acid. Acetic acid is just strong vinegar. You can do this with vinegar. It's going to take longer. This takes 6 months to a year, so I mean, you know, you're in no rush. Then you run it through sieves, and everything black is bone. And then I start looking at it through a microscope. Now, everything isn't microscopic, but there's a nickel for scale. There's another nickel, another petri dish with stuff in it. Some of it you can recognize. That's a shark tooth, that's a shark tooth, that's a shark tooth. But every single specimen ends up in one of these gelatin capsules. Some of these specimens are in the smallest manufactured gelatin capsules called number 5s. Then there's my desk, which I'll talk about several different ways. But there's another set of capsules. These are all these little plastic baggies that have the little capsules that come from a particular locality all kept together and numbers on them. I've got, again, like Dave, I've got about 20 different things going on at one time. And eventually, what happens to everything in this is they end up in these with museum catalog numbers on them. And you start filling up drawers by the hundreds for the stuff I spend most of my time working on. It's a work in progress. There are bins for acetic acid prep, more bins for acetic acid prep. Each of these black bags contains samples from localities that I haven't gotten around to processing yet, just waiting for the year that I have time to do it. And the other side of the room, all the black bags, nothing but bags of rocks that I'm going to put in acid, waiting for me. And I have to prioritize what I'm going to do and what's going to go into bets and how often. Right now I'm focusing on Allison's Ferry, which is what I showed you. So stuff that I've collected at Allison's Ferry is what's going in the acid and getting picked, with a few exceptions. And here is the world famous, okay, let me back this up. Allison's Ferry. Allison's Ferry is also called Allison's Landing. And if you Google Allison's Landing or Allison's Ferry Landing, you will get Google instructions on how to get there. The wonderful world of Google. I'm mentioning that because the last time I did this presentation, somebody said it would be real helpful if you'd show us how to get there. Google will show you. That's the good news for Allison's Ferry. The bad news is it will not show you how to get to Birch's Ferry. So something for me to add another slide to my next presentation, how to get to Birch's Ferry. You don't want to try to find it on your own. I'll just leave it at that. Birch's Ferry is world famous. It's world famous for a variety of reasons, and I'm going to show this slide because most bone and fossils that people want are collected right here at this contact between what's called the Donahoe Creek Formation and the Pee Dee Formation above it. If you ever get out there, that's where you want to start looking. That's not where I'm going to look, but it's where generally people want to start. Somebody will dive in there. This is Birch's Ferry for scale, with a human in there. It's a nice high exposure. Birch's Ferry is world famous for these, Belemnitella americana, belemnites for short. And I have a bunch of them up here at the front for you to look at if you've never seen one. Basically, it's an extinct type of, I'll say for lack of a better term, squid. And you can see a reconstruction here. It's world famous because these can be used to radiometrically date the Late Cretaceous. When we see that the Late Cretaceous is 66 to some odd million years ago, those are what are used to date the Late Cretaceous, radiometrically. There's a way to do it. I can't do it. I can't explain it. I'm not going to even try to explain it. If Dave Chichimuri was here, he could spend an hour talking how they do it. I'm not. Birch's Ferry has been published, the vertebrates have been published twice. The first one goes back to Lawrence and Hall. It's very general. Dave Chichimuri published the next layer down. I talked about the Donahoe Creek. Pee Dee Formation has been published by Lawrence and Hall. Dave Chichimuri published the vertebrates they found in my mind just went blank. The layer underneath the Pee Dee. At least leave it at that. Donahoe Creek, got it. But there's still more there to be discovered. My focus right now is Allison's Ferry, so I'm going to leave that alone for now. If you can remember, I'm not going to bring it back up, that diagram at the beginning of localities. Allison's Ferry is closer towards the ocean. Birch's Ferry is closer towards Florence. In other words, it's further inland. So Allison's Ferry was further off the coast 66 million years ago. So what kind of fossils would you expect to find there? Well, we'll get there in a second. This is Birch's Ferry again. There's a shell there. It's got some black stuff in it. Fossils, vertebrate material. Quinby is furthest inland of the sites I've mentioned so far. I'm not worried about people finding this site, because you're not, okay? So I'm showing pictures of it. It's in private hands and all that, but you're not going to find it. Good luck. Well, the point of showing it is you never know when you're going to hit the Late Cretaceous around here. When the Pee Dee goes down, I know you can hit the Late Cretaceous. This is nowhere near the Pee Dee. It's in the vicinity of the Black Creek, but it's a lot higher than the Black Creek. That's what it looks like in the winter. That's what it looks like in the summer, but it's a famous site, and it's been published. If you can find it, great. I'll come back to Allison's Ferry in a second, but right now I'm going to shift gears. Shark teeth. Identifying shark teeth is not easy. That's a nice way of putting it, okay? People bring me a shark tooth and go, "What is it?" Or you see it on Facebook. "What is it?" First of all, is it a Neogene shark tooth or is it Cretaceous in age or earlier? Neogene shark teeth are very different and have a completely different series of classification things that you go through. Most people just want the common name. Scientists don't go by common names. We don't do that. And I'll get into that. If it's Cretaceous in age, it's another whole ballgame. And then we get into this. And why trying to figure out two shark teeth that look the same, are they really the same or are they different? Sometimes it's fairly easy. If you bring me a Squally-Corax cowpea tooth, I will be able to tell you it is Squally-Corax cowpea almost instantly. No question in my mind. Squally-Corax pristodontis works the same way. All the sharks that have those teeth have teeth that are the same. What we call monognathic heterodonty. Top and bottom teeth are the same. All the sharks have the same kind of teeth. They're easy to spot. Then you start dealing with where the tops and the bottoms are different. Then you deal with the ones where the types of teeth change as the animal gets older. One shark can have all these different teeth. Last but not least, to really throw in a monkey wrench, sexual dimorphism. Males and females of the same species can have different teeth. All right, enough. But it gets at why identifying shark teeth is not easy. And I will say that 2/3 to 3/4, maybe even more of the people that will tell you, oh, are wrong. They're giving you a very general description. And in that sense, they're right? Possibly. Possibly. Last but not least, dealing with specific teeth. Abrasion. These teeth can be identified. These teeth probably can be identified. These teeth we're getting into maybe not at all. The most common thing people bring you are the points. And sometimes you can kind of get in the ballpark, but the reality is most of the time we'll say, I can't tell you. It's a sharp, pointy thing. It's a shark. That's the best I can do. All right, Allison's Ferry. I asked what kind of things would you expect to find in the late Cretaceous material there? The answer is sharks and fish, and lots of them. It was the furthest offshore. It makes sense that the vast majority of things that we're collecting there are sharks. Chondrichthyes is a fancy word for sharks. Everything in red has never been described from South Carolina. It's new. Yes, I'm going to show you pictures of them. I will try to go through them quickly. More sharks. Get the point? Sharks. And if you've come to my previous presentations, this list has about doubled since my last presentation. We keep finding more sharks and rays. All right, diagrams. Most of my diagrams are not the fanciest. Quite often they're black and white, and part of that is so I don't have to get permission to use them. I'm doing a public presentation. If I go to a new reference, then that author is going to expect me to request permission to use their images and all that kind of stuff, copyright stuff, and so I go use old things where the author's dead. Or the author had, it's 30 years ago, which is why I talked about that one where I said it's at least 30 years old, and I'm not worried about it. Okay, teacher here. Lessons you learned. Hybodont sharks are completely gone, but we get their teeth sometimes. This is late Cretaceous. That's a tooth. This is something called a cephalic clasper. They had things on top of their heads. Not really sure what they used them for. Probably used them for mating, would be the best guess. How? We don't know. Lysotus is another hybodont, but this is tiny teeth in this character's mouth. That's 1 millimeter. So this thing is that size. Heterodontids, they still exist. If you want to know the common names, sometimes they're there. Bullhead, horn, Port Jackson. Scientists don't use those terms. It's heterodontus. And that's a Port Jackson shark, modern, living. And it's little tufums. Heterodontus, notice that the entire height of this is less than 1 millimeter. Another heterodontus. Now we get to the angel sharks. They still are around. And now we get into a real mess. And I say mess because, well, it's a mess. The classification and identification of the fossil ones, not the recent ones, the fossil ones, is a mess. But carpet and nurse sharks are still around. Ginglymostoma has been published as being here. But the ginglymostoma that's been published is probably not ginglymostoma. Instead, it's probably Plicatocilium, not Chilocilium either, not Cantiocilium, one of the Plicatociliums. This is where we start getting technical real fast, and I'm going through it. Another Plicatocilium, and then maybe another Plicatocilium. Carpet or nurse sharks, probably the easiest way to remember them. They're a mess, the fossil ones in particular. Whale shark. Whale shark, largest fish in the ocean. I don't have a scale there, but these are 1 millimeter, roughly 2 millimeters tall. Tiny, 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 tiny teeth. And we're not sure what they are. We think it's called Pararincodon. We think it's whale shark, but we don't know. Remember, I mentioned Squalicorax caupi. You show me anything that looks like that, and I know what it is. Done. Easy. Squalicorax pristodontis, again. Done. No argument, no discussion. Then we get into the sand sharks. And this is a nightmare. They all have pointy little teeth that look kind of the same. Carcharias. That's the only one we've got that we're sure of. Then we get into goblin sharks that are still around, called Scapanorhynchus. The new genus is Mitsurcinidae, something like that. There are arguments about whether they're the same or not. We don't need to get into that, but they're still around. And that's a modern one that was caught in a fishing net. Today, Scapanorhynchus, or the goblin sharks, are all very deep water sharks. But back in the day, in the late Cretaceous, they were apparently much more common and much more near the surface. Mackerel sharks. Again, we get into debates about classifying. I'm positive this is Cretalamna appendiculata, Ceratolamna serrata. Going through them fairly quickly. Now we're into another group called the smooth dogfishes, in general terms, the Triachidae to me. Tiny teeth. Cat sharks. Again, you want to get into sharks and shark teeth. Most sharks are not big. They're tiny. Just the opposite. Cat sharks are called that because they're about the size of a cat. And their teeth are tiny. These guys aren't. Sclerorhynchids. Sawfishes are big. Their teeth are big. Now, all right, these big fish that have these big teeth sticking out of the saw blade also have tiny little teeth in their mouths. These are those tiny little teeth in their mouths, 3 millimeters across, for example. And then you get into debating about which one is it. Guitar fishes, rays and skates, eagle rays, they're around. They're the ones that if you collect ray plates down here on the beach, it's usually a mylobatid, one of them. This is a mylobatid, but we don't know what it belongs to. Texabatus, rhombotus. And this thing that we have, that other people have, and nobody knows what it is. Done with the sharks. Now we're on to other fish. The good news is these are easier to see usually. Bony fish. Encodus petrosus has been described. I put this picture in here just because it kind of gives you an idea of the different kinds of bony fish that we know were around in the late Cretaceous. Pycnodonts. We don't have anything from here around. Aspitorhynchids we've got. Pachyrhizodonts, Allopiforms we've got. These others we don't have for certain. Encodus is probably the most famous one. That's a reconstruction. Now, I throw that in here because when people start seeing Encodus teeth that are this big, they don't understand that we have we have fish with teeth that big today. They weren't as common as they were in the late Cretaceous, but they're still around. Nice fishy. Moving on. This is at the specimen at the State Museum. Encodus question mark. Somebody's identified it as Encodus. I'm not convinced, but it's big. So it's easy to take a picture of it, so I put it in my presentation. If it's not Encodus, it's one of the other fish from that time frame. That's one of these large palatine fangs from Encodus. This is Encodus. These are palatine fangs from Encodus petrosus in my collection. It's the same one, just different angles. This is Encodus gladiolus. Notice the hook nature to it. And then Encodus ferox, maybe. I'm not sure that's what this is, but maybe. If it is, it's new. Bonefish, big fish, game fish, famous for fishing shows. It's always they're going bone fishing in Florida. People don't understand they have tiny, tiny, tiny teeth. Tiny teeth. Pycnodonts. I mentioned pycnodonts at the top of that diagram. Anomiotis teeth, easy to find. People call them boat teeth because you turn them upside down. They look like little boats. That's what you find most of the time. These are pycnodont pharyngeal teeth. They look like cat's claws. There's a picture that's missing that I thought I'd gotten in here, so it's going to show up at the wrong time, but that's all right. I hope it shows up, but there's a picture missing. There's another picture of a nomiotis, a nice picture of a jaw that I thought I got into the presentation. Maybe I didn't. At any rate, this is a fish scale. First time I started seeing these, I thought they were just little pieces of plastic. You find pieces of plastic from people's fishing lures and stuff like that in the material that we collect. And so I was throwing them out. And then I thought, these keep showing up, and they keep looking the same, and maybe I need to figure out what they are. They're scales that go with these fish, Dercetids. You don't see the scales in this picture. This is a diagram of their scales. And then you see, it's not exactly the same angle, but that's it. There they are. They're lateral line scales. And this is a picture of the same thing in a publication. I do not have a picture of a surfactinous tooth. Again, Kansas specimen, nice and complete. If you look down here, it's got another fish in its belly that it had for lunch. The downside with all these specimens is they are flat. Other fish teeth that have no names at this point. The other thing that's unique about what we collect here is the detail that's preserved. These are complete fish scales. 66 million year old fish scales. That's a ctenoid scale. That's a cycloid scale. Doesn't get any better than that in the fossil record. I don't have a picture of a gar, but we have gar scales also. The same fish that live in our rivers today and that we have out here in our aquarium were living 66 million years ago, or their ancestors were, essentially unchanged. Then we get into what is it? That, I have no clue. I think they are pharyngeal teeth, bones, but I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody's told me. Almost looks like a jaw, but it isn't a jaw. These are jaws, parts of jaws. I'm going through them quickly. That's fish, but I don't know what fish. Looks like a jaw. Excuse me. Back it up. Looks like a jaw. Maybe not. I don't know. Part of a jaw of a fish. All right. Allison's Ferry is mostly sharks and a few bony fish and one mosasaur tooth, which I'll show eventually. But if you come up here to Birch's Ferry, the sharks almost go away completely, and you start picking up all this other stuff. Turtles, hadrosaur teeth, mosasaur stuff, a completely different fauna. Now, I've added this in here also. This is where it gets a little complicated because I'm focusing on Allison's Ferry but talking about other things also. I may, back it up, well, there it is. I may have part of a jaw of a salamander from Allison's Ferry. But if you will remember, at the bottom of the title of my presentation was Things That Go Fling. I don't know where that is now. The other day, right after I finished taking these pictures, using a very fine paintbrush tip, I picked it up and was putting it into one of those tiny gel caps, and the next thing I knew is it went fling, went flying. Anybody that works with micros, things go fling. It happens. I hope I find it, and I may not. That's just the way it is. I've checked half of my desk. Remember that pile of stuff I showed you? I went through all of that the last day and a half. Didn't find it yet. I've also swept the floor looking for it. Haven't found it yet. And I may not. There are specimens that go fling and you never find it. And this guy is so small. So this is my evidence at this point. I also learned as I was taking this set of photographs, this is also getting at the issue of taking pictures and handling specimens. When you're dealing with really small, fragile stuff, all it takes is a little movement in the wrong way, or sneeze, or cough, and it's everywhere. So things that go fling. I was pretty sure it was an ambistomatid, because when I looked at it initially, it looked like I had two parallel rows of teeth. But now with this picture and some others, I'm not sure that they're exactly the same size, so I'm not sure it's an ambistomatid. It could be an amphibian, it could be a fish, I don't know. And if I can't find it, all right, enough. Turtles we got, lots of them. We have a piece of Archelon, but I don't have a picture of it. This is a specimen from Kansas. Reconstructing Archelon isn't that hard. It's basically a turtle. It's a sea turtle. It's pretty much flat to begin with. Mosasaurs are marine lizards. They are not dinosaurs. This is the mosasaur tooth from Allison's Ferry. I have no idea what kind of mosasaur it is, but there's no doubt it's a mosasaur. You can't really see it in this picture, but one of the characteristics of mosasaur teeth is an elongated oval opening in the base. And that's what it's got. So it's not a croc tooth, it's a mosasaur tooth. They do not have anything like this at the State Museum. They don't have anything like it anywhere that I know of. But there it is. Mosasaurus is well known from South Carolina. I identified this as Clydastes. It may or may not be. These are mosasaur teeth that I did not put any identification with, just their mosasaur teeth. National Museum specimen, this is Mosasaurus, this is Clydastes. Large mosasaur cervical vertebra. Partial mosasaur caudal vertebra. This mosasaur would have stretched the length of this entire stage easily. Plesiosaurs, that's a vertebra. This is a podial, part of a limb from a plesiosaur. Kansas specimen. Crocodile teeth. I went through and tried to lighten up a lot of these pictures to make them show up better here, but they're still too dark. Croc vertebra. All right, Deinosuchus. This is a cast of a specimen that was collected right across the border in Elizabethtown, North Carolina. There used to be a pit there that isn't there anymore. The actual specimen is at the North Carolina Museum in Raleigh. But this is a cast of it. And I was gifted a bag of stuff from there. I have another couple of bags of stuff from there. And going through it, let me show you the other picture of Deinosuchus from the top. This is a croc, that's why it's in here. That's the tooth that I found in the stuff that was gifted to me. And again, how do I know it's a crocodile? A circular opening at the base. Now, what does that not? I've talked about circular openings, I've talked about oblong openings, I've talked about crocs, I've talked about mosasaurs. What have I not talked about that also have teeth, that are reptiles from that time? Plesiosaurs. I'm not aware of anything that's confidently plesiosaur teeth from South Carolina. There should be, but we're not sure. Pterosaur teeth, also. That should be pointy and sort of like the same, but all right, miscellaneous reptile material. Poop. Fossil poop is fairly common. Hadrosaur, duck-billed dinosaurs. Big dinosaur, tiny little teeth. And that's not a really good picture, but that's what I've got. These are at the State Museum. Hadrosaur teeth have been collected at Birches Ferry. Moving on to the dinosaurs that people get excited about. These are two specimens from dinosaurs that were collected at the Stokes Quarry. The Stokes Quarry doesn't exist anymore. I don't have it on my map because it just doesn't exist. Allison's Ferry, back to Allison's Ferry. I may have a theropod tooth from there. I say may. I've been going back and forth with this. It could be a fish tooth, but we can't figure out what fish it goes with either. So I'm thinking theropod. Of course I'm thinking theropod. That would be a dinosaur tooth. But it's small. And then this is my most recent find. It looks like a jaw to me. And that's not a fish jaw. It's not a reptile jaw that I know of. And I look at this, and I go into anatomy books, and it looks like a part of a mammal jaw. I don't have any teeth to go with it, but I don't know. Back to the I don't know. I can show it to Dave Chichamuri, and I already know what he'll say. I don't know. Beach fossils. There's two things I want to cover before I close today. Beach fossils are generally not of scientific import. They're generally not what I'm interested in. But when you bring in something off the beach that's never been reported from South Carolina before, all of a sudden it's interesting, just because it's never been reported before. The problem with beach specimens is you don't know where it came from. You don't know what layer in the rock it came from, so it gets hard to date. One of my rabbit holes I've gone down. And this is what the poster is about over there that I took to the last GSA meeting. Baculites. What I want you to focus on are these lines in it over here. This pattern. Okay. Ammonites have that kind of pattern. Ammonites have been reported from South Carolina. This has been reported from South Carolina. Nothing this good has been reported from South Carolina ever. Okay, but Baculites has. I'm trying to remember if I have this slide in here. Here is Baculites. That's the pattern, the suture pattern, if you can see all of it. This is also talking about Sphenodiscus. And that green thing that's sitting over there, the thing that's sitting on the green plastic over there is a sample of Sphenodiscus. That's the other rabbit hole I'm going down. The man that has published the only record of Baculites from South Carolina is dead. His collection was at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. It's been moved at least twice that we know of since then. It's still in the Smithsonian, but at one of those off-site storage centers. And so when I sent Mark Florence a list of the specimens and localities I was interested in, this is what he sent me. Baculites spa, and even with the really good photograph, I can't tell what that is. Doesn't mean it isn't, but I can't tell. And the same thing for all the other localities. As he said, going through it, I can't find anything that's definitely Baculites. So there is no record at this point in a museum of Baculites from South Carolina that we're positive of. Part of the problem, and I don't think I show you this. No, I don't. Part of the problem is not only has the collection been moved, but drawers have been renumbered and the locality numbers have been written over. So trying to figure out which drawer out of 150 cases of this stuff from Seoul has what they're looking for, it's probably there, but for all intents and purposes, it is missing at this point. So getting the Baculites of South Carolina published, even though it's a beach find, is a priority. More Baculites collected from the beach. This was already in our collection. More pieces from the beach. And if for lack of a better term, just this kind of wavy pattern should be a clue. And there's the poster and me up at Reston, Virginia. And if you bring in something like this, all of those specimens except one were brought in by people like you to me. You know, I make sure in the acknowledgments of the paper or whatever that I thank you for all the stuff you bring in. This is a Baculite specimen at the National Museum. Whoa, there I was. It's just beautiful because you can see the suture pattern in such detail there. Sphenodiscus, I've already shown you that. This is a Sphenodiscus from Ape. I'm not sure the issue with Sphenodiscus is going to be as bad, but I haven't spent the time to really get into it. I've got these specimens here to look at. This is a beautiful Sphenodiscus at the National Museum. Over there, I've got a bunch of Exogyra cristata, if you're curious. You see Exogyra cristata, it tells you you are in the Late Cretaceous. That's the age you're dealing with. And I'm going to skip all the way down now. Respect property owner rights. Probably the biggest message I have. And in case you didn't know it, people own the beach. People will say, oh, it's public access. Yeah, it is. But the city of Surfside Beach or the city of Myrtle Beach or the city of Garden City owns the beach. Most of the time, if you're out there picking up things, they're going to have no problems with that. If you show up with your backhoe and start digging in their beach because you want to collect shark teeth, they will have a problem with it. I'm using a sort of absurd example, but you would not believe what some people think. From personal experience. Somebody owns the property. Next issue. Somebody owns the rivers. But I found it on the bottom of the river. I was scuba diving and I found it. It's mine. Yeah, if the state wants you to have it, it's yours. If the state doesn't want you to have it because it's particularly valuable to the state will be happy to take you to court and get it back. Dave Chichamuri can tell you all about it. He's one of the major headhunters that goes after collectors that don't do things the way they're supposed to be done. You and your family out picking up things at any of these sites, no problems. The moment you bring your backhoe in, the moment you try to sell stuff online that you've collected, even if it's off the river bottom, if you don't have the proper license, people will come after you. It's not your property. Still sort of on the same ramp. I'm almost finished. The same sort of rampage. People that are out treasure hunting and they find a treasure. If it's within 12 nautical miles of a country, it belongs to that country. Which is why they then try to do whatever they're doing secretly, because they know as soon as they get caught, they're going to be in court and have to turn it over, and all of their expense goes right down the drain. Collecting anything below mean low water requires a hobby license. I just throw that up there because, again, it specifically going after divers, again, that think if you pick it up off the floor of the Waccamaw that it doesn't matter. Yeah, it does matter, especially if you decide to try and sell it. People keep track of that kind of stuff. You're supposed to have a hobby license. It's not expensive. It is a hassle because you have to report what you found and what you're doing with it. It's state property. It's not yours. But I found it. Okay, fine. You found it. Last but not least, you will find sometimes these signs out there. Of course, some people don't appreciate them, which is why they shoot them up. But the recovery of artifacts and fossils from navigable waters of the state of South Carolina is governed by a law and requires a license from the state. There it is. I don't care what it is. I don't care what river. I don't care what pond. At any rate, somebody owns it. Facebook, bunch of different sites. Suggested resources that I have up here for you to look at. Oceans of Kansas is wonderful if you're interested in Kansas and really nice, complete stuff, but it also explains the Late Cretaceous. If you're just interested in shark teeth and collecting in general, these over here are more appropriate. If you want to get into technical details, then these things are available, Amazon, whatever, you can get them. These are not considered, these are considered professional publications, but they're available if you're interested. Almost done. Robert W. Purdy, Key to the Common Genera of Neogene Shark Teeth. Back to the question of what kind of shark tooth is this? That is the definitive guide to modern shark teeth. It is online. It is still there. Most people don't want to deal with it because you have to know anatomy of shark teeth and the terminologies that go with it to use it. If you don't know the anatomy and terminology, don't bother going there because it won't give you anything. It is not the sort of thing where there's pretty pictures for you. Okay? This is not up here, and it's not in the handouts that I ran off because those are older, but I also added South Carolina's fossils. It's a website that Jared Schuler has created, scfossils.com. It's brand new. He's just created it. He only has Cretaceous stuff in it for right now, but it's there, and it's accurate, I guess is the best way to put it. There's other websites that are out there. Use at your own risk. When somebody on Facebook identifies it, it might be right, okay? Lots of people to thank that I'm going to skip over. I don't know why I have that up there anymore, but I do. Oh, I remember why. Just kind of sort of humorous to end with. Fred, raccoon that would come in and sleep with me when I had my, kind of like a cat door, and cats could come and go, and so Fred would come in, and possums would come in, and one night Fred decided to come in and take a nap next to me, no problem. Thought he was a male until Fred showed up with kits. And because of the cat, one of the cats I have now, I've had to close that cat door. But so this is not an experience I'm having right now. But I'm sure Fred's kits or some of the others are still some of the ones coming into my garage for food every night because I feed them. That's back to the days when the door was open. Never had a problem. They were never an issue. My cats could have cared less. And I'm done. Thank you. Thank you.